Zara Vincent stared at the handwritten letter on her kitchen table, her coffee growing cold as she read the elegant script for the third time that morning, wondering if she had made the biggest mistake of her life by agreeing to meet the stranger who had become her closest confidant over the past 18 months. It had started innocuously enough. Zara worked as a restoration architect, specializing in historic buildings, and she had written to the owner of the Brightwell Estate about potentially restoring the century-old manor that sat abandoned on the outskirts of Portland. She had expected a form letter back, maybe a polite rejection. Instead, she received a handwritten response that was thoughtful, detailed, and surprisingly personal. The owner, who signed his letters simply as Samuel, seemed genuinely interested in her ideas, but also curious about her passion for preservation. Their correspondence had evolved from professional discussions about crown molding and foundation issues to something much deeper. Samuel wrote about his childhood, about losing his mother young, about the pressure of living up to expectations. Zara found herself sharing things she rarely told anyone: her fear of never being good enough, her complicated relationship with her father, her dream of one day opening her own firm. There was something liberating about writing to someone who existed only in careful penmanship and thoughtful words. She never knew much about his life beyond the emotions he shared. He never mentioned what he did for work, where exactly he lived, or even his last name. She had looked up the Brightwell Estate once, finding only vague records of a private owner and a property value that made her whistle low. But the man in the letters never felt wealthy or distant. He felt real, vulnerable, human. Now, after 18 months of weekly letters, he had suggested they meet. The restaurant he proposed was upscale, somewhere Zara would need to dig into the back of her closet for something appropriate. She had agreed before she could talk herself out of it, but now, sitting in her small apartment with morning light streaming through the windows, she felt terrified. What if he was nothing like his letters? What if she disappointed him? What if the easy intimacy they shared on paper evaporated the moment they faced each other in person? Her phone buzzed. Her best friend, Monica, texting, "You're still going tonight, right? Don't you dare chicken out." Zara smiled despite her nerves and typed back a confirmation. She had told Monica about the pen pal months ago, swearing her to secrecy. Monica had been equal parts skeptical and romantic about the whole thing, but she had helped Zara pick out a dress last week. Deep emerald green, elegant without trying too hard. The day crawled by. Zara tried to work on plans for a Victorian home downtown, but her mind kept wandering. She took a long bath, did her makeup twice because the first attempt looked too desperate, and changed her earrings 4 times. By the time the car service arrived that Samuel had insisted on sending, her hands were shaking. The restaurant was exactly as intimidating as she had imagined. Soft lighting, tables spaced far enough apart for private conversations, waiters who moved like dancers. The hostess smiled warmly when Zara gave her name. "Mr. Peterson is already here. Right this way." Zara followed, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. They wound through the dining room to a corner table, and then she saw him. He stood as she approached, and her first thought was that he looked exactly right and nothing like she had imagined simultaneously. Tall, probably early 30s, with dark hair that was slightly too long and needed a trim. He wore a suit that fit perfectly but looked uncomfortable in it, like he would rather be in jeans. But it was his eyes that caught her. Warm brown, nervous, searching her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Zara," he said, and his voice was deeper than she had imagined, rougher. "I'm Samuel Peterson." "Hi," she managed, and then they were both laughing awkwardly, the tension breaking just enough for her to breathe. He pulled out her chair and they sat. Up close, she could see the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hands fidgeted with his water glass. He was nervous too, she realized, and somehow that made everything easier. "I have to admit," Samuel said, "I've started this conversation about 40 different ways in my head and now I can't remember any of them." That makes two of us, Zara said. I practiced in the car and it all sounded ridiculous. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face. Your letters are never ridiculous, neither are yours. She paused, studying him. You're real. Were you worried I was not? Maybe a little. 18 months is a long time to build someone up in your head. Do I measure up? There was vulnerability in the question that made her chest tight. Ask me again at the end of the night, she said, but she was smiling. Dinner unfolded like their letters, easy, deep, surprising. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up with a father who built a manufacturing empire from nothing and expected his son to want the same things. She told him about her mother, who had died when she was 15, and how she had thrown herself into architecture because buildings felt permanent in a way people never could. Is that why you wanted to restore the Brightwell Estate? Samuel asked, leaning forward. Because it was about permanence. Partly, but also because it was beautiful, because someone had loved it once and it deserved to be loved again. She hesitated. I looked up the property records. I saw the sale price from 5 years ago. I couldn't find much else about the owner except that they valued privacy. Samuel set down his fork carefully. That owner is me. Zara blinked. You own the Brightwell Estate, and about 15 other properties. Plus the company my father built, which I took over when he retired 3 years ago, Peterson Manufacturing. We make industrial equipment. It is not glamorous, but it is successful. He met her eyes. I'm wealthy, Zara, very wealthy. I did not mention it in my letters because I wanted you to know me, not my bank account. She sat back, processing. Peterson Manufacturing. She had heard of it, seen their name on buildings downtown. That's why you never talked about work. Why you kept things vague. I've had enough people pretend to care about me because of what I can give them. Your first letter was about architecture and passion and bringing something dead back to life. You didn't care who I was. You cared about what I cared about, his voice roughened. Do you know how rare that is? So this whole time I've been casually corresponding with a millionaire. Does it change things? Zara thought about it, really thought. The letters had been real. His words, his vulnerability, his late-night confessions about feeling lonely despite being surrounded by people. Those things did not come from money, they came from him. No, she said finally, but you're buying dinner. He laughed, the tension breaking again, and they fell back into conversation. He told her about taking over the company at 28, about board members who thought he was too young, about learning to trust his instincts. She told him about her first major project, a courthouse restoration that had nearly bankrupted her emotionally, but taught her everything about perseverance. I've been thinking about the Brightwell Estate, Samuel said as dessert arrived. About your original proposal. I want to move forward with it, seriously. But I have one condition. He leaned forward. I want to be involved, not just writing checks, but actually there, learning about the process, helping where I can. That house has been empty too long. I want to see it come back to life. That's not usually how these projects work, Zara said, but her mind was already racing with possibilities. The owner typically stays hands-off. I'm not typical. I'm starting to see that. They stayed until the restaurant was nearly empty, talking until the waiter politely suggested they might be more comfortable elsewhere. Samuel paid the bill without looking at it, and then they were outside in the cool Portland evening, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Can I drive you home? Samuel asked. I'd like that. His car was nice but not ostentatious, a BMW that was a few years old and had actual coffee stains in the cup holders. Somehow that detail made her relax more than anything else that evening. He drove carefully, asking about her neighborhood, and when they pulled up outside her apartment building, neither moved to leave. I'm glad we did this, Samuel said quietly. I was terrified you would not be anything like your letters, and, you're better, you're real. Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks. I was thinking the same thing about you. Can I see you again? Not just for the Brightwell project, actually see you. I'd like that too. He walked her to her door and they stood in the dim hallway, neither quite knowing how to end the evening. Finally, Samuel reached out and squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger's letters," he said. "Thank you for writing back," Zara replied. She watched him walk away, then leaned against her door, a smile spreading across her face that she could not contain. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a new rhythm. Samuel still wrote letters, delivered by courier now, but they also saw each other. Coffee dates turned into long walks through Powell's books. Working lunches about the Brightwell Estate turned into dinners where they forgot to talk about work entirely. He showed up at her office with sandwiches when she was buried in deadlines. She dragged him to architectural salvage yards and watched his eyes light up at old fixtures and reclaimed wood. The more time Zara spent with Samuel, the more she saw the complexity of his life. He worked long hours, navigating complex deals and managing hundreds of employees. People deferred to him constantly, agreed with him even when he was clearly fishing for honest opinions. He admitted once, late at night as they sat in his car outside her apartment, that he never knew if people liked him or his influence. "Except you," he added. "You argue with me about everything." "That's because you're wrong about Victorian trim work," Zara said. "I'm not wrong. I'm just less passionate than you are." "Same thing." He turned to look at her, his expression soft in the streetlight. "I'm passionate about some things." The air between them shifted, charged. Zara's breath caught. They had not crossed that line yet, staying in the comfortable space of friendship and possibility. But the way Samuel looked at her now, the way her heart raced in response, made it clear they were both thinking about it. "Samuel," she started, but he reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with such tenderness that words evaporated. "I'm falling for you," he said simply. "I need you to know that. This is not just nostalgia for the letters or curiosity about meeting in person. I'm falling for the woman who lights up when she talks about corbels, who leaves coffee cups everywhere, who has opinions about everything and is not afraid to share them." "I'm falling for you too," Zara whispered. "I think I started in the letters, but it's so much more than I imagined." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious. Zara's hands found his shoulders and she kissed him back, feeling 18 months of longing and connection finally manifest in physical space. When they broke apart, both breathless, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for a while," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" "I wanted to be sure that you felt it too, that this was not just in my head." "It's not in your head." They started dating officially after that, though Zara laughed at the term given they had been emotionally intimate for over a year. Samuel was thoughtful in ways that surprised her. He remembered she hated roses, so he brought her wildflowers instead. He learned her coffee order and her work schedule, and the days she needed space to decompress. He introduced her to his small circle of actual friends, a college roommate who was now a teacher, a cousin who ran a nonprofit and listened carefully when they gave their approval. Meeting his father was more complicated. Richard Peterson was in his 60s, sharp-eyed, and clearly used to being the most important person in any room. He invited them to dinner at his estate, a modern mansion that made Zara's apartment look like a closet. "So you're the architect," Richard said, studying her over expensive wine. "I am," Zara said, refusing to be intimidated. "Samuel tells me you're working on the Brightwell Estate. I told him to tear that place down years ago, pour money into something productive." "Some things are worth preserving," Zara said evenly. "The Brightwell Estate is a piece of Portland's history. Tearing it down would be erasing part of the city's identity. And restoring it will cost a fortune. Maybe, but some investments are not about immediate returns." She glanced at Samuel, who was watching her with barely concealed admiration. "Sometimes they're about legacy." Richard studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You've got spine. Samuel could use more people around him with spine." He turned to his son. "I like her." Samuel squeezed Zara's hand under the table, and she squeezed back. Work on the Brightwell Estate began in earnest that spring. Zara assembled a team, brought in specialists, and Samuel kept his word about being involved. He showed up in jeans and work boots. asking questions, taking notes, getting his hands dirty. The crew was skeptical at first. Wealthy owners rarely lasted more than a day when faced with actual labor, but Samuel won them over by showing up consistently and never complaining. Zara loved watching him in this environment. He was confident but not arrogant, willing to learn, good with his hands. One afternoon, she found him helping repair a section of the grand staircase, wood shavings in his hair, completely focused on what the master carpenter was teaching him. "You're full of surprises, Peterson," she said. He looked up, grinning. "Good surprises, the best kind." They stole moments together on the site. Lunch breaks on the overgrown lawn, evenings walking through rooms slowly coming back to life, quiet conversations about what the house must have been like in its heyday. Samuel confessed that he had bought the property on impulse 5 years ago, drawn to it for reasons he could not explain. Now, watching it transform, he understood. "It felt like me," he said one evening as they stood in what would become the library. "Neglected but not beyond saving. Waiting for someone to see its potential." "You're not neglected," Zara said, turning to face him. "I was before you." He pulled her close. "You see me, Zara, not the company or the money or what I can do for you, just me." "Just you is pretty wonderful," she said, and kissed him as golden light streamed through the newly restored windows. Their relationship deepened as the months passed. Samuel gave Zara a key to his downtown loft, and she gave him one to her apartment, though they joked his place had better water pressure and hers had better character. They navigated their different worlds. He taught her about board meetings and corporate strategy. She showed him the hidden Portland spots only locals knew. His world was bigger, more public, but he moved through it with increasing confidence when she was beside him. There were challenges. Samuel's ex-girlfriend, a socialite named Candace, showed up at a charity gala they attended, making snide comments about Zara's off-the-rack dress and quaint profession. Samuel had been furious, confronting Candace publicly and making it clear that Zara was not up for discussion. Later in the car, Zara had assured him she was fine. "She's trying to get under your skin," Zara said. "Don't let her. She insulted you. I've faced worse than a jealous ex. Besides, I like my off-the-rack dress." "I love everything about you," Samuel said fiercely, "including your dress. Especially your dress." There were also moments of adjustment. Zara struggled sometimes with the attention that came with dating someone like Samuel. Photographers at events, mentions in society columns, the way people treated her differently when they learned who she was dating. Samuel was patient, never pushing her into situations she was uncomfortable with, always checking in. "We can leave early," he would whisper at fundraisers when she looked overwhelmed. "I'm okay," she would assure him, and she was. Because at the end of the night they would go home together, shed the formal clothes, and be just themselves again. The Brightwell Estate project took 1.5 years. When it was finally complete, they held a private viewing before the official opening. Zara walked through the rooms with Samuel, pointing out details. The restored parquet floors, the hand-painted ceiling medallions, the original fixtures they had painstakingly refurbished. The house glowed with life again, every corner telling a story of craftsmanship and care. "It's perfect," Samuel said, standing in the grand entrance hall. "You brought it back." "We brought it back," Zara corrected. "This was always a collaboration." "So what happens now? You hand me the keys and we move on to the next project?" "That's typically how it works." "What if I don't want typical?" Samuel took both her hands, pulling her close. "What if I want to keep collaborating on everything for the rest of our lives?" Zara's breath caught. "Samuel." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "I've known for a while now. Probably since our first dinner, if I am honest, but I wanted to wait until this moment, until we were here, in the place where our story really began." He opened the box, revealing a ring with an emerald stone surrounded by delicate diamonds. "I had this made with stones from my grandmother's ring. She was the one person in my family who always told me to find someone who challenged me, who saw past the surface. She would have loved you. I wish I could have met her," Zara whispered, tears already forming. Zara Vincent, will you marry me? Will you keep arguing with me about architecture and leaving coffee cups everywhere and being the best thing that ever happened to me? Yes, she said, laughing and crying simultaneously. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, and they kissed in the entrance hall of the house they had restored together, surrounded by history and possibility. They married 6 months later in the Brightwell Estate's garden, which Zara had also overseen the restoration of. It was small, just close friends and family, exactly what they both wanted. Monica cried through the entire ceremony. Richard Peterson gave a surprisingly emotional toast about his son finally finding someone worthy of him. Zara's father walked her down an aisle lined with wildflowers and told Samuel quietly that he better treat his daughter right. I plan to, Samuel had promised. Every single day. Their honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy, exploring old buildings and eating too much pasta and making love in hotels with ancient stone walls. They talked about the future, where they would live, whether to start their own development company focused on historic preservation, when to start a family. Everything felt possible with Samuel beside her. When they returned to Portland, they made decisions. They chose to live in the Brightwell Estate, in a private wing Zara had designed specifically for a residence. They started a joint venture, Peterson Preservation, combining Samuel's business acumen and resources with Zara's architectural expertise. Within a year, they had 3 major projects and a growing reputation. Zara got pregnant 2 years into their marriage. Samuel was impossibly gentle throughout, worrying over every symptom and reading parenting books obsessively. Their daughter, Emma, was born on a rainy October morning, tiny and perfect and exactly right. Samuel held her in the hospital, tears streaming down his face, and told Zara she had given him everything he never knew he needed. A family, he whispered. A real family. They had a son, James, 2 years later. The Brightwell Estate filled with noise and laughter, toys scattered across restored hardwood floors, sticky handprints on antique banisters. It should have felt wrong, Zara thought sometimes, but it felt perfect. The house had been built for a family, and now it had one again. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Samuel suggested they write letters to each other like they used to. They sat in the library, the one where he had first told her she saw him, and wrote by hand while their children slept upstairs. When they exchanged letters and read in comfortable silence, Zara felt the same flutter in her chest as that first reply 5 years ago. Samuel's letter was beautiful, talking about how every day with her was better than the last, how watching her become a mother had made him fall in love all over again, how he still got nervous sometimes that this was all too good to be true. I never expected the letters would lead to this, he had written. To love, to family, to a life I didn't know I was searching for, but here we are, and I would not change a single word. Zara looked up to find him watching her, and she moved to sit beside him on the couch they had picked out together. She leaned against his shoulder, feeling his arm come around her automatically. I love you, she said simply. I love you too, Samuel replied, kissing the top of her head. Thank you for writing back. Thank you for being worth writing to. They sat there as evening turned to night, content in the house they had restored and the life they had built. 2 people who had found each other through careful words on paper and discovered something neither had been looking for. A love that felt like coming home. Years continued to unfold with a rhythm that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. Emma started kindergarten, solemn and serious with Zara's artistic eye and Samuel's careful nature. James was all energy and chaos, constantly building elaborate structures with blocks and declaring he would be an architect like Mommy. Peterson Preservation grew, taking on increasingly ambitious projects, and Zara's reputation in her field solidified. Samuel balanced running his father's company with their joint venture, finding fulfillment in both. They still wrote letters occasionally, usually on anniversaries or when one of them traveled for work. The physical distance made them both reflective, reaching for the intimacy that had started their relationship. Zara kept every letter in a box in her study, organized chronologically, a paper trail of their evolution from strangers to friends to lovers to partners to parents. On their 10th anniversary, they held a party at the Brightwell Estate. Friends and colleagues mixed with family, spilling from the house into the gardens. Monica cornered Zara near the dessert table. "Remember when you were terrified to meet him?" Monica said, grinning. "When you thought it might ruin everything?" "I was an idiot," Zara admitted. "You were cautious. But look at you now, you're disgustingly happy." "I really am." Zara found Samuel later on the terrace, having escaped the party for a moment of quiet. She slid her arms around him from behind, and he covered her hands with his. "Successful party?" he asked. "Very, but I prefer this. Just us, always just us." She moved to stand beside him, looking out over the grounds they had brought back to life. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had never written that first letter?" "All the time," Samuel admitted. "And then I make myself stop because the thought is unbearable. You changed my life, Zara. You gave me purpose beyond just running a company. You gave me love and family and a reason to come home." "You gave me the same," Zara said. "I was so focused on restoring buildings because they felt safer than people. You taught me that people could be permanent too, that love could be the thing that lasts." Samuel turned to face her fully, cupping her face in his hands. Even after 10 years, the way he looked at her still made her heart race. "I plan on lasting forever," he said. "Just so you know." "Good," Zara replied, "because you're stuck with me." They kissed as the party continued inside, as their children played with cousins in the garden, as the life they had built hummed along around them. The Brightwell Estate stood solid and beautiful, a testament to restoration and second chances, much like the two people who had fallen in love while bringing it back to life. When they finally went back inside, Emma ran up to show them a drawing she had made of the house. James was already asleep on Richard's lap, and the older man looked more content than Zara had ever seen him. Her father was deep in conversation with one of their contractors about a vintage car restoration. Everyone she loved was here in this space, and it overwhelmed her in the best way. "You okay?" Samuel whispered, noticing her expression. "More than okay," Zara said. "I'm home." And she was. Not just in the physical space of the Brightwell Estate, though she loved every corner of it, but home in the life they had created, in the love that had started with careful words on paper and grown into something vast and permanent and real. A love that had surprised them both, that neither had expected when they started exchanging letters about old houses and architectural details. She had never expected the letters would lead to love. But here she was, surrounded by the evidence of it, living inside a story better than anything she could have imagined. And as Samuel squeezed her hand and led her back into the celebration, Zara felt grateful for every word they had written, every risk they had taken, every moment that had led them here. Because some stories, she had learned, were worth every uncertain step. Some loves were worth the leap from paper to reality. And sometimes, the best things in life came from being brave enough to write back.